What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome to the show. I am super stoked to have you. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, and Kevin for all their support. And if you want to join those fine folks and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you can become a patron for as little as $3 a month. That's less than $1 an episode. And if you do that, you'll get some sweet, sweet perks for your support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told some friends. And for more information on how you can support the show, and help more people find out about what we're doing here, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. So I've got somebody I'm really excited to talk to today. One, Frankie Kastenbaum. You may know her from LinkedIn fame. She's been a top voice, not once, but twice, which I'm actually really impressed by the way. I got to figure out how to do that because I'd love to get, I'm a little envious, I'll be perfectly honest. And I'm not talking about those silly AI article badges, top voice. I'm talking about the actual ones where humans nominate you when you get selected. So that's a pretty big deal. Not only that, Frankie is a former, an alum from my alma mater, Tulane. We went through the same course back in the day. So we got a fellow New Yorker that was a New Orleanian for a little while, and now she's back in New York City. So we got Frankie Kastenbaum, and I'm so excited to have her have her on the show today. We're going to talk about finding UX insights in your everyday life and in the mundane things that you don't really expect. Frankie is a senior UX designer who's passionate about breaking the barrier of entry for beginner UXers. And throughout her career, she has worked at a variety of companies and company environments, from a startup, a design agency, and several corporate companies. She focuses a great deal of her time on mentoring upcoming designers through one-on-one sessions, as well as educational content on both Instagram and LinkedIn. And her efforts as a content creator has been recognized twice by LinkedIn, naming her a top voice in design, both for 2020 and for 2022. So Frankie, welcome to Beyond UX Design. I am so excited to have you on. How's it going?
Thanks, Jeremy. I'm so excited to be here. It's going great. Super excited. Can't wait to get into this topic and get into all that you just said.
I love it. So a couple of things like I've noticed with you on LinkedIn, I think this is really cool, and something I wanted to talk to you today about. You've had several posts where you talk about, UX insights, things you've learned about UX design from just the sort of random everyday things. And I think that's really cool. And I want to talk about that. But before we get into all that stuff, tell us a little bit about you, your background. I mentioned you went to Tulane, but you're there's a lot more there than that. Although, I am partial to the New Orleans stuff. But tell us a little bit about you. How'd you get into UX design, and how'd you end up becoming a content creator?
Yeah, sure. So for me, it will come full circle, I promise. But basically, when I was younger, in high school, basically thought I was going to become an engineer. That was kind of always the plan. Started learning to code, front end and back end, kind of expected that was the game plan. As you said, I got to Tulane, realized my brain does not work that way. I am not mathematical. I am definitely a design brain. So I got to college, realized I was not good at this, and that I needed something that was more of a kind of work-life balance, going to be more fun, and something I actually wanted to do. So I ended up basically exploring a bit more. I wanted to find something that allowed me to really still solve problems like coding did, but do it from kind of a mindset that was more of, design-based and more fun for me. So kind of through more exploring, I ultimately got into graphic design for a little bit.
Cool.
But didn't really like how there wasn't, at least for me, and I apologize to the graphic designers out there, but for me, I felt like I didn't really have a reason for why I was making my design decisions in a way that was comfortable and confident. There's brand guides you follow and things like that, but it wasn't enough for me. So, I ended up realizing UX was that perfect kind of middle ground where it pulls it all together. It brought in the problem solving, it brought in, the design piece, but it also had that research where I was really missing that. Yeah. And so that's what led me afterwards to a boot camp, honestly. And then ever since in the UX space, kind of just going full step ahead, figuring out that kind of path for myself. Right. But yeah, you also mentioned the content piece. So I'll jump into that as well, because that's a whole other side of this. That was something I never thought I would get into, honestly. As someone who used to hate being behind the camera, hated hearing my own voice, it's kind of weird to see, that's what I do now. But basically when I first was breaking into UX, Someone mentioned to me, like, I don't really care how you do it. Just get your voice and your opinion out there. Start a blog,
I
start
love
a
it.
podcast, started this, started that. I don't care. Was really hit the point. And so at that point, I started on Medium. Figured, that's my most comfortable way. I'll just start posting about kind of the passion projects I'm working on. And that ultimately led me to kind of going full steam, LinkedIn, Instagram, the whole 9 yards. And now, doing it a little differently, less about the projects and more about like from a senior standpoint. But yeah, I fell right into it, honestly.
Yeah, I love that. No, that's so cool. And one of the things that, like I said, I really found fascinating about your content on LinkedIn was a lot of the stuff that you post about finding those UX insights in sort of the everyday life. So I really want to talk about that. And one of the things that I'm curious about from your perspective is, clearly you've got a lot of these analogies, and I'm just wondering, I'm thinking about the value of a good analogy and kind of how it helps to kind of get these people who are learning UX to kind of think about it and learn from personal experience. I'm curious from your perspective. I want to talk a little bit about just sort of the value that you found from a really good analogy. It's not really a question necessarily, just like your thoughts there about about like how this has helped you to share insights and help people learn.
No, 100%. I think it's a good point. I know one thing I've always learned about kind of whether it's like teaching or helping someone is like, I've noticed that the way that it resonates the best if you can connect with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that obviously that kind of comes in a lot of different images and a lot of different pieces. But I think that's where I was getting these analogies and why it kind of led to them was the fact of like, it's easier to explain something to someone if they can relate it to something else. Especially for people who are outside of our industry. UX is kind of a weird one to explain.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you don't go through the steps of it and you're not in the actual industry yourself. It's kind of this like unknown box almost a little bit to a lot of individuals. And so I think that creating an analogy allows you to kind of connect that better because it allows you to kind of see, oh, okay, I understand XYZ. So because I understand this, that makes understanding UX a little easier. So I think that was really what kind of led me to it and why I think it works.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I
So I'm
answered your
curious.
question or your point.
Yeah, no, that was perfect. That was perfect. So I'm curious. A lot of these things that you're talking about, these are lessons you've sort of learned. I'm curious, like, where do you go to find some of these lessons? Do they just sort of come to you in the shower while you're doing a random thing, or is it something you're trying to find so that you can make analogies to share those insights? Or how does that do? Is it maybe a little mix of both?
Honestly, it was not intentional at all. It's usually just they come to me randomly. In a weird way, like I've heard a lot of quotes. Like I'm a big workout person.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't hidden that on any of my like content. So you've probably heard me talk about that a lot. But basically, during a lot of my classes, I find they'll say quotes that just resonate with me that obviously they're saying in the sense of like getting you motivated, getting you to like
Mm-hmm.
keep working out. But in a weird way, and maybe it's because my brain is always thinking about like the UX kind of job search from that for the content piece, my mind
Mm-hmm.
always goes to that. I'm like, oh, this can make sense. So I think it's just that is like I hear things or I'm starting to think about something, and I'm like, wait, this actually connects. So I think it's that problem of being a content creator and I don't know how to turn my brain off, that they always just kind of
Yeah.
like automatically come when I don't mean them to.
Yeah, that's so funny. How do you, I'm sure, how do you, I'm curious how you keep track of them. Do you have like a pen and paper? Do you have like a favorite notebook? Do you like just, I don't know, take a audio thing? I'm just curious how you do
I have an
that.
iPhone. Honestly, I
It's
have
a
a notes
magical
tab
tool.
on my phone that I just kind of always put notes in. You would think it would be more organized. It's kind of just random notes. And then what I end up actually doing is I have a Notion template for like a calendar that I end up using and
Hmm.
like going in and actually like setting up, okay, like this is for LinkedIn, this is for Instagram, here's the different pieces. And then I can like actually put the post in those and go more in depth. But yeah, honestly, for the random ideas, it's just on my phone and my notes.
Okay. So I'm curious like how you go about taking those things. Like walk me through an example. Like you mentioned, you and I had a call not long ago, and you mentioned you were at the gym. You pinch your finger, and you're like, "Oh, this is." I'm trying to think of how to like. Talk to me about that process. I want to.
Sure.
You don't have
Yeah,
to
it's
share
a
your
weird one.
secrets or
That was
anything,
a
but I'm just
very
curious how that works.
that was a bit of a stretch, but honestly, I thought it worked really well. But it was kind of a weird mentality. So for those of you who didn't see that post, basically I was working out, had some weights, Ended up getting my finger stuck between two weights. I'm fine, don't worry. Little pain for, a day or two. But basically I started thinking about, and I don't really know how I got there, but I think it was more of this mentality, honestly, of like, wait, I need a post. Because I had been lacking a little bit. So I was like, okay, what can I connect that's every day? And so I started thinking about, okay, like this is interesting. Like the more I started thinking about things I was trying to do, I think I started typing on my computer or writing a text message. And I was like, wait a second, because I think it was my thumb that I got stuck. So I was like,
Oh
I
gosh.
actually use my thumb for so many things that you don't think about. And I was just getting so frustrated because anytime I was trying to do something, I couldn't do it, or it hurt at least. And so I think it just got me thinking of like, okay, this is interesting. Like I don't think about how much I use my thumb for everyday things. Like this is
Okay.
similar to, I think, maybe something that was going on with one of my projects where I was like, I don't really think about a lot of the small pieces and how important they are. And so it just kind of
Yeah.
got me spinning and got me into this mentality of like, all right, there's a weird connection here. Like, let's see where this takes me. And just kind of went with it.
That's hilarious. I love that. Cool. Yeah. So, and then is it like a matter of refining it, or do you ever go back and kind of test it with with your audience, or test it with some students or mentees or something? Like, does this make sense? Or is it just sort of you're just like, I'm going for it. I'm just gonna do it. Throw it
I'll
out there. See
usually
what
write
happens.
it, and then I'll end up proofreading it, editing it a couple of times, messing around kind of on the phone or on Notion, and then
Hmm.
I'll just kind of post it. Maybe I should be A/B testing, sending it to mentees to, you know, students. I don't know, but I don't. I'm just like, you know what? Let's just see it. I don't know. For me, I think that's kind of the fun part and the scary part of content of like,
Yeah.
you know what? I like this, so I'm gonna post it. I think that was the
Yeah.
big like transition for me. It was like, you know what? It's obviously I care what they think and I want like to get the engagement. I want it to be helpful. But I
Hmm.
think it's also at the end of the day is like I've noticed like I'm going to post what I want to post. I'm going to
Yeah.
post what I think is important because there's a reason why I think it's important, whether if it's talked about or not. And so
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's the wrong mentality to have, but that's kind of where I'm at
No,
now.
I actually believe the same thing. Like, there's people all the time will be like, oh, your posts are this, or your posts are too long, or you need to format them differently, or talk about something that's trending. And I'm like, I don't want to.
Exactly.
I don't want to. I don't. It's not me. I'm not doing that. If you don't like my posts, then I don't know. Don't like them or whatever. But I'm not changing. But
Exactly. Plus, like
I
you can
totally.
A/B test
Yeah.
basically like as you go through them. Like one day you do like one with a photo, one day you do one with
Hmm.
text, and just kind
Yeah.
of see that way as well. But I don't know.
Kind of see what works. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, I love that. So I'm curious. Like, you've been posting for a long time. Obviously, you've been top voice on LinkedIn, and so you've shared quite a bit of stories, and not everything is an analogy, obviously. But I'm curious. Over the last couple years, out of the things you shared, what have been some of the most interesting analogies that you have shared that you feel like have resonated with people, that really made it click for a lot of people? Because, like you said, it is sort of it can be very confusing for a lot of people, especially
Mhm.
new designers that don't have a background in UX. What's some stuff that you've shared that you felt like really click with people?
I think probably the analogy that probably made the most sense and kind of was the easiest to understand to like everyday audience, I guess you could say. I don't know, that felt weird.
Mm-hmm.
Would be cooking.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like that's something, even if you're not a good cook, everyone has probably cooked at least once in their life. I'd like to
Yeah.
hope.
Yeah. Yep.
Some sort. And so I think that's the one that's made the most sense because, like, if you think about cooking, for example, there's kind of three phases I like to think of it as. There's the
Mm-hmm.
first phase where let's pretend you're cooking for a friend, a spouse, a partner, something like that. You're cooking for someone
Mm-hmm.
else. And so I think first step is thinking about what are the ingredients that they don't like or they're allergic to. So thinking about
Mm.
from that mindset of like, okay, what can you not use? What is not going to make this user or your person you're cooking for unhappy? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the first step to think about. And I'll relate this back to UX in a second. But then step number two is okay, now that you've figured out what ingredients you're using, you're starting to cook, you start iterating. You start probably testing or tasting more so
Yeah.
the different ingredients you've put together. Is it too salty? Is it too this? Does it need this? And you start tasting it, kind of trying to, mold it together to get to a place you're happy with. And then the last step would be thinking about, the plating of it. Obviously, most of us are not professional cooks. We're not going to go all out, but at least you want to think about, what's going to make it look appetizing, what's going
Yeah.
to get
Yeah.
your person who you're serving it to actually want to eat this and make it look good. I think that's the easiest part or the the simplest layer more so of how you want to serve it. And so I think
Yeah.
like that has resonated well with people, because if you break those down into the UX, first step being what are the ingredients or what can you not use? Okay, that's basically doing some user testing.
Yeah.
You're technically talking to your users, you're hearing feedback from them, you're getting to know what they like, what they don't like, what's not working. So that's phase one. Phase number two would be you're tasting it, you're getting through and making sure that it actually works. Okay, you're iterating, you're going through different processes, you're trying different screens, you're seeing the flow that works, what doesn't, things like that. And then bucket number three is going to be the aesthetics. For UX, you want the
Yeah.
product that you're building to look
Sure.
right.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
whether it's to keep them engaged, to keep them, coming back and wanting to use it, to make it actually work. Does the flow work? Does it actually make sense? And so I think that's the last bucket, is like, the aesthetics and making sure that it actually pleases them. And so obviously I've kind of gone on a rant there and it's been on the longer side, but I think that's the one that's worked well because it resonates, because
Yeah.
everyone knows how to cook and you break it down easily.
Yeah, or everyone's eating a meal, or everyone
Exactly.
is, and that's the thing that I love about this, because like when you think about software, building software, it's a really complex process. Generally speaking, there's a lot of words, big words, things, complex words, complex concepts, things that are very confusing and can get very technical. And
Yep.
being able to, this is why I love this idea so much of just finding the insights in the everyday thing, is it makes it much simpler to break it down. And that food analogy, I love that one. Actually, I had Ann Cantera on not
Mhm.
long ago, a couple months ago back, talking about her experience as a chef and how it translates so well to not even just UX, but just software development in general. I
Yep.
think, where you've got a front of house staff, a back of house staff. Working in restaurants really is very similar, in theory, at least the insights, not in practice, obviously, but getting that concept across. It's a great analogy. I love that analogy.
Thanks. Yeah.
I'm like a big foodie, obviously. Like I love food, and I almost went to culinary school. So like
Hmm.
I love to cook, and I that was like one of the first, thinking about kind of analogies. One of the first things like I realized, like I think like a very long time ago, was that idea, like cooking, eating, meal preparation, everything is like so similar
Hmm.
to the way we build really great software. I love that analogy. You had another one that was really good too, about skiing. Talk to me about, I don't know. I know I asked you your favorites, but I'm putting that one out there. But I really
No,
like the
I love the
skiing one. I
skiing
thought that
one.
was really good.
I love to ski, so I can always talk about that. So, but happy to do that. But yeah, skiing is another one that it was interesting, where it's kind of a similar idea. Where with skiing, specifically, let's say you're going down like a mogul run. And for those of you who don't ski, I'm talking about the nice little bumps on the mountain. And so basically, if you're trying to do that in like a more professional way, quote unquote, if you can't see me doing that, um, basically the whole idea is that you want to start at the top of the mountain and think about kind of um, finding your pathway at the very beginning, all the way from the top to the bottom before you even start. So that as you go, the whole idea with the moguls and going through them is when you're in the middle of one, you want to basically be thinking about how to get around the next one, so that you get your body in the right position so that you don't fall forward or backwards and basically fall over. And so that got me thinking about how it relates to UX, because it's the same idea. With skiing, you want to think about, the full flow basically from A to B, or A to Z, I guess you could say. And the same with UX is that when you're designing something, you want to think about really how you can make sure that all flows your user is going to take is already thought about, and that your user is going to be content with going through kind of their happy path. And so it's the same idea of like, you want to make sure that the whole, uh, where am I going with this? I'm gonna start over. You
It's
want
all
to
right.
make
Go ahead.
sure,
Yeah.
it's similar, because you want to think about how when you're creating a feature, let's say for a product,
Hmm.
you want to make sure that when you ship it, that you probably have the full thing, so that your user can end up doing the entire process all at once
Right.
without getting frustrated and leaving the product, I guess. And so it's the same idea with skiing, where you want to think about the full entire run from the start, so that you don't get stuck in the middle and have to stop and then rethink about your path and figure out where you're going. So again, kind of a weird one, but it actually really connects.
Cool. No, I love that. All right. So one of the things I'm kind of curious about is you've talked to a ton of new designers, and a lot of people, I think, we mentioned about how like, this idea is very foreign to a lot of people that are coming over. Some common misconceptions that you've seen that analogies have kind of helped to, change that perspective. Does that make sense? Is that something that you kind of like have seen where you see sort of common things that you see all the time people kind of have wrong that an analogy has sort of helped to fix?
It's an interesting one. Trying to think about that because I think a lot of times with the conversations that I end up having with, especially with my mentees, is usually more so of like portfolio reviews and breaking in. And I think at that point, it's also more so about the fact of like they already seem to know what UX is, at least at the lowest level. So they already have ideas, and I think that's where the analogies help. Is more so for people who are a step behind them almost, where it's like they think they know they want to go into this, but they don't fully understand what it is, or for people who just have zero idea. I think that's more so where the analogies come in, or maybe it helps my mentees in the sense that it helps them then relate to, their families and explain what it is that they do in a better way. But I don't know if it's necessarily helped with those conversations per se.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Cause I'm thinking about like just some analogies. I don't know. I'm trying to like find an analogy right now, but with like portfolio reviews, I think there's an analogy there with like, how especially now where these recruiters and hiring managers are just so overwhelmed, and there's just sort of like they're overflowing. It's like you have a sort of funnel, and you've got like all the like water coming in or something in a funnel, and it's like there's not enough room in the funnel, and it's overflowing, and it's like, how do you manage it all? I just think about like it's not really an analogy, but the thing I think about right now more than anything is like the intro to Laverne and Shirley. I don't know if you remember that show from like the 70s, but like they worked at or there was an episode where they worked in a candy, like a chocolate factory or something. And they were supposed to be like testing stuff and making sure like they were, passing only the good candy down the conveyor belt. And it got to the point, they started off kind of slow, and they're just sort of like, moving the candy. And then they got to the point where it's just like hundreds and hundreds of like candy chocolates are coming down the conveyor belt, and they're like putting in their pants, and they're like eating it and trying to, like they're just so overwhelmed. And I feel like I don't know, maybe this isn't an analogy necessarily, but there's sort of like I just think about that right now with like hiring managers and how to make like your portfolio as easy for them to either accept or reject as possible, so that they don't have to spend a lot of time, like Laverne and Shirley. Is it Laverne and Shirley, or was it, which show was that? Maybe it wasn't Laverne and Shirley. I don't know. I have to go like look this up now. Anyway,
before my time.
Yeah, no, well, me too, I guess. I used to watch it on Nick at Night when I was a kid, which is still, I guess.
The thing that I'm thinking about it, I think it was probably some spoof of what you're talking about, because this is clearly way more my generation, I guess. But there was a Drake and Josh episode where they basically did that.
Oh yeah, they probably
must have been like a play on it, and I didn't realize. I thought it was like, oh, this is a funny idea,
Yeah, everything comes back around.
Oh yeah,
there's no original idea, which again is sort of like interesting when you think about that, because like a lot of these things that I think like we can teach younger designers, they come from like other things. It's like never really like an original thing. It's like something that somebody else has thought of before, and you're manipulating or changing it in some way to tweak it slightly, So anyway, that's also like, I don't know if that's an analogy, but that's another interesting way to think about it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's all about thinking about, again, this is where my UX mindset comes in, but I think it's always thinking about like who you're talking to and how it's going to resonate well with them. Thinking about, how can you explain something in a way knowing maybe a little bit about that person, how they think, what they've done, and using that information as a way to be like, oh yeah, this, let's frame it this way. So that then that, okay, there's more of a chance that this will resonate with this person than if you just kind of did it your generic way, maybe, or something like that. I don't know. Maybe there's too much thought going into my conversations.
Yeah, no, I love that. All right, so here's something I'm kind of interested in hearing from you. So this happens to me a lot. I'm at a party, bunch of non-software people, non-technical people, and, or networking event or something. And, someone says, yeah, what do you do?
Oh no.
And, I'll just say something like software design or something, because everybody understands, like, I design the interfaces for the software. I don't get too deep in it. But I'm curious, when you're at a party and someone asks that, is there an analogy that you like to use that, a really quick thing to explain what you do to some random person who has absolutely no idea what software is or how software is built?
Yeah,
Putting you on the
that's
spot.
always the dreaded question. I've definitely A/B tested this over the years and tried multiple different things, whether it's an analogy or it's like different definitions and things like that, just to kind of see what sticks. And like, obviously, it's always different. But I don't know. Now I don't know if it's necessarily an analogy, but now I kind of just stay with like, I'm kind of the middleman between like the users and the business and the developers. Like I'm kind of the step right before them. Or like I'm the designer before the developers. Which is like so basic, but it kind of works. But I guess in terms of like an analogy, now you got me curious and I want to test this next time. I don't know, maybe I'll try like a workout one or a cooking one next time, because I think those are the ones like everyone understands. So yeah, I'm gonna test it out next time.
All right, try it out. Report back. We'll have to have a follow-up episode and a design bite. We'll just check in. Yeah, I actually like the restaurant one too, and I like the idea of a chef, preparing a meal or whatever. It's kind of funny though, like how do you the thing I struggle with that analogy is like, where does UX fit in to that? And like, because like, are we the executive chefs? It's like, I don't think we're the executive chefs. Like, and then that begs the question, like, well, who is is it the product manager? Like, I hope not, is it the CEO? Like who is the executive chef? But anyway, that's just, I think
that's why
too deep into
you
it.
got to take it a step back for the cooking one. I think that's why like I broke it down less about like being in like a professional setting for like a cooking setting, and more so from like I'm gonna cook dinner for a friend, because then I think it's like easier. But you got me thinking. Now I am curious about like the professional aspect of like how do we elevate this, I guess, to the next level. But yeah, I think I almost feel like it would depend on who you ask as to like what level we would be, which is bad.
Everyone's gonna think that they're the executive chef.
Exactly. It's gonna always differ, but I think also every org would be different depending on like
That's true.
where UX kind of fits. And like how much, not really power, but how much like sway, I guess they have. I don't know. I feel like that's a better way to put it.
Yeah, no, that's true. But the other analogy here too, though, is that like every restaurant's different as well.
Yes.
Right. So there are restaurants where the executive chef is the commander in chief, and everyone says yes, chef, like salute. And there's other restaurants where it's like totally flat. Everybody's got their own ideas and thoughts and can kind of add to it. Which is kind of interesting too, because when you think about that, when you go to places like that, like, because there's a place like, you remember the PJ's Coffee down in New Orleans, right? You remember PJ's.
Yeah.
So PJ's has their franchise, and a bunch of random people will own a bunch of PJ's. So this is a local coffee shop, anybody that's not aware. And the problem there is that they're all freaking different.
Yep.
Like the menu's different, the coffee is different, the quality is different. Like there are some PJ's that have amazing iced coffee, cold brew. And there are some where it tastes like garbage. And I'm like, I don't go to that PJ's because their coffee's terrible, but I'll drive across town and go to the other one. And anyway, there's kind of like an analogy I feel like there too to how you're running, the experience of a user, right? And like how you have these disjointed, this one applies really, I think, to like something like service design, but where you've got a completely different experience because there are these disjointed processes and there's no standard work. And, obviously the way one shop makes their cold brew is clearly very different from another one. And so as a user, I go and I go to these experiences, or I go to these places expecting the same experience and have a completely different experience because the systems don't connect or the teams don't talk or whatever it is. So anyway, that's an analogy I like to use for something like service design.
No, I like it. I think that's the interesting piece where it's like we have to remember that UX is, a lot broader than digital products. I think that happens a lot of times with like juniors, especially where like they forget or they don't think about the fact that. We good?
No, you're good. Sorry, you froze, but you're back. Sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I think
I'll cut this out.
I think that's the other piece, so that like we have to remember, especially like as juniors, that like it's not just UX is not just digital. Obviously there's different umbrellas and it can change names and there's different pieces in different sectors. But at the highest level, like there's a lot of different pieces. Like it's not just the digital experience. It's also like how do you get someone into your product, kind of the step before the
Yeah.
physical aspect of using it. And
Yeah.
I think like those pieces are not always thought about.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I think it's interesting. There's a lot
I
more
love
to
that.
it, basically.
Yeah, I love that. So one of the other interesting things too that I think about when it comes to analogies, we talked about, helping new designers understand the concepts at a high level. But there's also this idea of, transferable skills and things
Mhm.
that people can bring to the table from a past career, right?
Totally.
Especially this is true,
Mhm.
especially for career shifters. And I'm curious, like how have you thought or have you thought about analogies, people who have done other things to help them think about those transferable skills and how they might apply to their new or future job as a UX designer? Is that something you've ever thought about?
Yes and no. I've definitely had the conversation about thinking about kind of what are those transferable skills.
Mm-hmm.
And what can you bring to the table that may not be kind of the first thing you think about. That would make, the most sense. But now I'm curious, how have I done it with an analogy? Let's see. Um, it's usually just more of a conversation where it's like, okay,
Yeah.
like what was the day to day? Tell me what you used to do. I think fun ones for me that I've like got to thinking about was bartenders or like airline stewardess.
Okay.
Because I think a lot of people wouldn't really associate the connection. But after those conversations, it's like, wait a second, like there's so much here in terms about like empathy and talking to users and helping them out.
Yeah.
So I think it's, thinking about putting yourself, and I don't know if this is necessarily an analogy, but like putting yourself in the shoes of what you used to do.
Yeah.
And thinking about, okay, like what is it that I did how did I interact with others? I guess. And I guess I'm kind of veering off and it's not really an analogy and I apologize. Um,
Yeah. No, that's fine.
but I
The
think it's more so that is just like thinking about what it is. And now I'm curious on
Yeah.
the spot if I can come up with an analogy that would help with that, because now I'm very curious.
Well, here's something I just thought about. I don't know if you've thought about it this way, but with the stewardess one, right? Like
Mhm.
this is an interesting analogy because when you think about UX design, a lot of times people just assume like our job is to cater to the needs of a user, right? And
Mhm.
just focus on the user. But you have to focus on the needs of the business so that the
Nope.
business makes money so they want to keep paying you, right? Obviously.
Mhm.
So when you think about a stewardess or a flight attendant, they're not there to cater to the passengers' every whim, right? Like, yes, they will get you drinks and yes, they will get you snacks, but at the same time, they're there to make sure that everyone stays safe, that you board and deboard, in an easy way, a safe manner. That when something happens, they direct you to where you need to go so they can save your life and things like that. And so like they're there to maintain law and order essentially on
Oh
with a
yeah.
friendly smile on the airplane, and their main goal is to ensure a safe flight. It's not to make you happy. It's not to get you every single thing you asked for. And there's certainly a balance there because they need to maintain the safety, but at the same time, they need to maintain a great experience so that you want to keep booking that airline over and over again, right?
Mhm.
And so there is kind of sort of an interesting analogy there, I think, to how UX designers need to focus on users, but also understand the business and what the business is trying to do so that the customers want to pay, but at the same time, the business needs to make money. So anyway, that's kind of like I haven't really thought about that much more, but there's, I think, an interesting analogy there between a flight attendant and how they would
Mhm.
sort of balance the needs of a guest, passenger, whatever you want to call it, and the
Mhm.
needs of the airline with users and the business. So I don't know. That's kind of an interesting. I don't know if you ever thought about that, but I just thought of that.
Oh yeah, there's a lot more behind the scenes that goes on with, the flight attendants for sure, and that there's a lot of pieces that move around for sure, and like we don't really see it or think about it. But yeah, I think it is an interesting thing to think about, kind of like, I want to know what analogy could be for that, for like, how do you satisfy or work in a position that's satisfying both the business and the users or the passengers, whoever we're talking about. I don't know. What's like a good analogy for like someone who's like the middleman? I guess, okay, hold on. Let's see. Let's try this on the spot. An idea
All
came
right,
to
let's do
mind. I
it.
don't know if it's going to work. Let's see. So
We'll try it. We'll test it out.
I don't know. I almost started to think about like if I was playing basketball. Obviously, my mind
Okay.
goes to sports and to fitness. But if I go back to my basketball days, right? So if I was the one with the ball, let's say, I have two people on opposite ends, or I have a couple. If I have the ball, my goal obviously is to pass the ball out. And I have a couple options. But let's say I only have two teammates up the top of the court, and that's where I'm going. So it's me and two other people. So one option is on my left, maybe, and they're the business. And that if I go
Hmm.
with them, you know, I'm going to satisfy the business, all will be go with them. But if I go to the right and I go to the other player who's on my right side, maybe that's the user and I'm going to satisfy them. And it's this idea of like, I'm stuck in the middle. I have the ball and I have two options to pass to, but who am I supposed to satisfy? Or maybe last second, a third person comes up the middle and they can do a layup and get in the middle of them both and get the ball in. And then that's the equivalent of like the middle option that satisfies both. Does that work?
Yeah. I think it works. I have to be honest. I don't know anything about basketball, so I'm
There.
like maybe the worst
Not a
person.
Falcons fan? Come on.
I mean, I'll watch the Pelicans. I had season tickets when they were the Hornets for
Okay.
like the 10 game thing. But yeah, I
Fine,
don't
we're
know.
not
I'm
very good
terrible at
anyways.
basketball, by the way. But no, I think this is actually another interesting thing to think about with analogies is that like sometimes analogies will work with one person and it'll completely fail
Oh yeah.
with somebody else because the interesting thing is like we talk about storytelling and we talk about all that stuff and it's like kind of a buzzword storytelling and all that but really the point is to convey a message in an easy
Mhm.
to digest way. That's really what we say like storytelling. It's like how do you
No.
get the message, the point across in as simplest language as possible. And, we use symbolism, I think, is like a really great way to do that. And so the interesting thing with symbols, and this is, again, why icons often fail, it's because what means something to one person
Yep.
means something completely different to somebody else. So, like the basketball analogy for me, like I don't really know basketball. So
Fair.
like that, but that analogy would work really well with, Trevor Nielsen, who loves basketball and he would totally
Fair.
get it. Right. So anyway, I don't know but that's an interesting. I don't know. Is that an analogy about an analogy? I don't know that.
I
It's
don't know.
like
You're losing me now.
analogy inception. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. That's just like an interesting takeaway though.
Mhm.
But
But yeah,
I think
that's
you
why
did
I
great.
like
That
thinking
was really
about.
good. You did.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No,
That's why I
you're
like
fine.
thinking about like so I like thinking about storytelling from like a conversation
Hmm.
standpoint and like relating it that way of like at the end of the day, all you're really trying to do by storytelling is have a conversation with someone and get it to a point where it's going to be something that makes sense to them and resonates with them. You know, at the end of the
Hmm.
day, that's really all it is. And what it comes down to, like the most simplest level.
Yeah, I love that. No, that's a really great way to sort of close the conversation out. No, I think that's really good. So, a question for you: anything else that like you want to talk about with analogies that we didn't cover? Anything we're missing? Anything you want other people to know when it
Mhm.
comes to finding UX insights in the everyday?
I would say, like, just think about what it is you love doing. Like, forget about UX for a second. Like, put that out the
Hmm.
window. Don't try and think about it. Like, don't try and connect it off the bat. Just think about for a few minutes, like, what is it that you love doing? What are some of your hobbies? You know, do you love, no, I don't know. Do you love being crafty? Do you love I don't even know. The world is your oyster. The possibilities are endless. But, you know, think about what it is that you love to do when you're away from maybe your UX course, your UX job, whatever it is. Make a list of those things and then think about, okay, what are the skill sets or the concepts that are you're constantly doing for those pieces? And think outside the box. You know, don't think about the simple ones. You know, try and think outside the box. Think about, you know, what maybe might seem a little crazy because I feel like that's where the fun analogies usually come in. And then once you
Yeah.
figure that out, be like, okay, let me now go down that list and kind of see, okay, what are the pieces that actually may connect to what I do as a day to day as a UXer? And I think that's where like the fun will come in. And that's where you'll start realizing, like, wait a second, like there's so many random connections out there, ones that, you know,
Yeah.
Jeremy and I haven't even thought of. Because I'm sure there's plenty other ones that I'm going to start thinking about now and trying to start to see what I can come up with.
No, sorry. You're like I feel like you're the tail end of your sentences. Sorry.
Uh-oh.
I don't know if like my internet or your anyway, it doesn't matter. Anyway, no, that's awesome. I love that. That is a great way to sum it up. Cool. So before we get out of here, I got some questions that I want to ask that I like to ask all my guests to help my listeners get to know my guests a little bit better. But before we do that, tell everybody listening where they can find you, where they can follow you, all your content and all that stuff, and give yourself a little plug.
Sure, thanks. So you can find me mostly two places. LinkedIn, just Frankie Kastenbaum, pretty simple. Don't be afraid to connect with me there. Send me a message. I love chatting with all of you. And then the other place is on Instagram. My handle is UX by, I got myself confused there. Or, whoops. Or on Instagram, my handle is UX by Frankie. Also love posting there and love having conversations. So don't be a stranger. Feel free to connect. I always like having conversations and talking to all of you.
Right on. Are you still doing your newsletter? It's
I
Frankly
am,
UX.
yes.
Okay.
So I actually
There you
just
go.
posted my first article today of the year. But
Oh,
yeah, you can
nice.
also find content on my LinkedIn newsletter called It's Frankly UX.
I love that. It's Frankly UX. That's a brilliant thing. All right, cool. So we got a few questions that I like to ask all my guests to help my listeners get to know my guests a little bit better. You ready? You ready to get started?
I'm ready. Let's do
5
it.
quick little things. Cool. All right. First up, what is your favorite non-design book?
So I'm going to change the question a little bit because I
Oh,
don't
okay.
read non-design books these days as much as it is.
Okay.
Honestly, so I have a book club, a UX book club centered
Yeah.
for kind of juniors. And so a lot of my time that I read, or all of my time, I should say, is spent reading kind of design UX focused books.
Okay.
So I'm going to pick one of those instead. So
Yeah, go
apologies for
for it.
kind of
Throw an audible.
straying the
We'll get
question.
it.
Yeah,
It's all
going
good,
audible.
yeah.
But my favorite design book right now is Design is Storytelling by Ellen Lupton. It was one I actually had as a college book at Tulane for one of my courses, and it just kind of stuck with me. I've read it multiple times.
I
Um,
love it. Okay, cool.
it's just really fun. It has a ton of pictures. There's a lot of analogies in it.
Oh,
And she
all
just
right.
does a really good job of like connecting like this idea and this concept of like how to tell a story for kind of every day, but also for how you really design a project. But yeah, it's an easy read. Highly
Sweet.
recommend.
I don't think I've ever heard of. I've never heard that book.
I love that one. It's a
Design
good
and
one.
storytelling. I have to look it up. Right on. All right. What is your favorite non-design podcast?
All right, I can actually follow this question.
Okay.
My favorite non-design podcast is How I Built This with Guy Raz. You heard
Yeah,
of
I
that
love
one?
that podcast. Okay. Yeah.
I love that one. It's
NPR.
really interesting to see like a lot of the products or the apps that I use and just hear kind of the backstories of how they all started.
Yeah, I love that. That's such an interesting. I remember there was one, and it was the woman who started Spanx like
Okay.
forever ago. This was like years ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, she was talking about how like she had it in her garage and everything else, and like I don't know, it's just like really interesting, like how she started. That
Mhm.
same for me. I love hearing about like all these like famous brands, and you're just like, wow, literally did it that way. You know, it's really cool.
The crazy one is
It's
Zappos. That was the first episode I remember listening to, and it like has stuck with me. Did you hear that one?
yeah. I don't think I listened to that one. No.
So basically, and I'll do it really shortly, but basically, like this guy kind of started with this concept of selling shoes by
Hmm.
having zero inventory. And just had this
Oh wow.
concept
Okay.
of like, how do you kind of do it? And it was like super, I don't know. Again, here's an analogy. Here's me going back to UX, but it's the idea of oh my God, I'm forgetting the name of the term now. The term where it's like the fake wall, like the mystery one. The Wizard of Oz. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's like the concept of the Wizard of Oz, where like basically like you kind of fake it till you make it and kind of make it work, but it doesn't actually work. It's all behind the
Yeah.
scenes. So he basically had people place orders without physically having inventory and would then go to the shoe store and buy it. And then he would ship
Oh wow. I don't think I realized that. Oh my God, that's crazy.
it. Hmm.
Yeah. Speaking of Wizard of Oz, there's actually like a lot of really interesting UX research methods where you can like pretend to be a chatbot and it's like a human on the other
Exactly.
end, or
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that kind of stuff. It's just or there's like it'll display some information when they select a thing, and that's all like auto. It's like not dynamic. You think it's dynamic, but it's just some random static thing that someone's manually doing in the background. But anyway, that's fascinating. I never thought to like apply it to a business. That would
Right?
scare the hell out of me. I'd be like, oh my God.
Same.
I like people order like stickers and stuff, and I would just like, it takes me like weeks to get to the post office. I just imagine like my business would fail if that were me.
Yeah,
All right.
who
What
knows?
is your favorite meal?
This is a tough one for me. I love food. Clearly, by all my
Mm.
food analogies. Probably something along the lines of, actually, well, these days we'll go with pad thai, honestly. I love a good peanut sauce.
Oh, nice. Yeah, and you're in New York City, so you've got like probably the best the best Thai food outside of Thailand, I'm sure.
Although, honestly,
within
like, I
walking
love
distance
making my
here.
own peanut sauce.
Oh yeah, okay, right on.
Fully
You know,
understand.
it's like Asian food for me growing up is like a Westerner. Like I'm used to
Okay.
Italian. My grandma's Italian and German, and so like I grew up with like European style dishes,
Mm.
and that's what I grew up learning how to cook. And so like trying to experiment with like Asian stuff, like South Asian, Indian, Vietnamese, Thai, Chinese, Japanese, like it's so like I love eating it, but like I don't know how to cook it. It's just like really weird. So like I got a lot of cookbooks and stuff, and like the thing is, with like Western style cooking, like I could just like throw stuff together and I'm like, oh, it tastes great. But like I don't know how to improvise with,
Okay, fair. Yeah, I'm gonna
with
be
like Asian
opposite in
food.
a weird way. I feel
Yeah.
more comfortable improvising with more of like the Asian like sauces and things than more so with maybe like other cuisines per se.
Really? Oh, that's
Yeah, I don't
cool.
know.
Yeah, I need to I guess it's just like a matter of practice. It's just
Yeah,
like, getting and also part of the problem is like a lot of the ingredients are hard to come by,
fair.
in a Western grocery store, so they have like the international aisle that's like,
Yeah.
two things from like one country or two things, but anyway, I don't know, but that's cool. I love a good pad thai. All right, what is your favorite vacation spot?
Either a beach or the mountain. Like I said, I
Beach or
love
the
to
mountains?
ski. So these days it's probably going to a mountain and skiing.
Do you have a favorite mountain,
Um,
or a favorite beach, or a favorite mountain
favorite
by a beach?
mountain is, well, my parents are in Colorado right now, so I'd say out there, out west.
All right. Is there are there like, I guess there's like well, there's the Rockies, obviously, the mountain range, but is there a specific mountain that people will go to for like skiing, or is it just like a range? I guess doesn't really have a mountain. I guess
Yeah.
does a mountain have to be a certain size to get a name? How does that work? I don't even know.
I should know this question and or the answer, and I don't know. I feel like I should know that. I don't
Yeah.
know it.
There's
I
not a
feel like
lot
there's
of
got to be some
yeah.
something there. I feel like yes. I'm gonna go with yes.
Yeah.
But I mean it depends. Like there's obviously there's different mountains. It just really depends like kind of where you are, I guess, in that area. Like my
Yeah.
parents have four mountains around them that are like for skiing, like four specific skiing ones.
Oh wow, nice. Yeah, like like Pikes Peak I think is in the Rockies. That's in Colorado, right? So you've got like one mountain, but there's clearly a range of many mountains. Like how did Pikes Peak get its name and all the other one next to it didn't? I don't know. Is it the size? Is it the height? I wonder. I have to look that up.
Maybe the
I'm like really
conditions
interested
and
now.
like people started going down it or honestly, I couldn't tell you. We'll
I'm
have to Google this
gonna
and get back to all of you.
after we get off, it's the first thing I'm gonna do. How does a mountain get a name? All right. What is your favorite design tool that is not Figma?
So I feel like I'm gonna get a lot of comments and pushback on this one.
Uh-oh. Spicy take.
I'm a big Canva user. Hot
Canva.
take.
Uh-oh.
I love Canva. So obviously I do a lot of content. And for
Hmm.
me, a lot of the stuff is kind of like on the go, or like the whole idea is like I have a brand, I want to be consistent. And I used to do it all in Sketch when I was before Figma. I know.
Hmm.
But I actually switched to Canva because now now I can do it like it's all like on the web. I can kind of do it on the go, whether I'm on my phone or on the web browser, and it's just so easy. And like for the designers out there, I know I don't use any templates. I've made my own template, but it's just like an easy, quick browser. You can kind of drag and drop and do what you want. But I know
Yeah.
I'm gonna get pushback.
Oh, no, it's cool. I actually have never really used Canva, to be honest. But do you? Is it free, or do you need a paid subscription to use
There's
it?
both.
Or is there?
If
There's
you
a free version.
want,
Okay.
so there's a free one that has plenty of templates, honestly, for like all types of stuff. And like you can just do what you need. Or
Hmm.
if you want to have more of like your brand style saved and like your fonts and everything and more custom, then you have to pay.
No, you gotta pay. Okay. Yeah.
But you can
But
get away easily with,
yeah,
so
just
much.
with the free one. Speaking of Sketch, it's funny. My old job, like we couldn't use Figma because of security stuff, because of the server thing,
Mm,
and the
interesting.
browser-based server thing.
Hmm.
So we were on Sketch for years, and they're still using Sketch.
I know companies like
I
that.
know I know the pain of Sketch. It's trying to have multiple people use one Sketch file is a goddamn nightmare.
Oh yeah, it
Which
just
is why
crashes.
Figma is amazing.
Yeah.
But cool, I love it. I won't fault you for Canva. Don't worry.
Thank you. Appreciate
Cool. All
it.
right. Well, that's everything for us, Frankie. I really appreciate you coming on. Before we get out of here, one more time, give yourself a plug. Where can everybody find you? And make sure you follow Frankie.
Yeah, thanks. So again, it's on LinkedIn, Frankie Kastenbaum, pretty simple, or on Instagram at UX by Frankie. Hope to see you on both of them.
Right on.